U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin have accepted a proposal in principle to hold a summit aimed at diffusing tensions over Ukraine. That's according to the office of French President Emmanuel Macron, who held a lengthy phone call with Putin on Sunday. The White House says the talks won't happen if Russia invades Ukraine, something Moscow says it has no intention of doing. Despite movement on the diplomatic front, Russia and Belarus have decided to extend military drills that were supposed to end on Sunday.
Russia extending military maneuvers with Belarus near the Ukrainian border. To the United States, it's a sign that Moscow is showing no interest in de-escalating the crisis. Despite that, French President Emmanuel Macron raised hopes of a diplomatic breakthrough. He spoke to Vladimir Putin on Sunday in 2 phone calls that lasted almost 3 hours. He said the Russian president agreed on the need to favor a diplomatic solution to the ongoing crisis and to do everything to achieve one. But the U.S. is skeptical. Secretary of State Antony Blinken maintains that Russia is on the verge of invading Ukraine.
Everything we're seeing tells us that the decision we believe President Putin has made to invade is moving forward. We've seen that with provocations created by the Russians or separatist forces over the weekend, false flag operations. Now the news just this morning that the quote-unquote exercises Russia was engaged in Belarus with 30,000 Russian forces that were supposed to end this weekend will now continue.
The weekend of mixed messages and power plays was paralleled by memorial events in Kiev commemorating the victims of the Maidan Square protests in 2014.
On this day, there was a turn in the history. People who died here are our heroes, and we have to remember them.
We need to remember that people gave their lives for Ukraine and for our European future. We need to respect and to love it.
Back then, dozens were killed during protests that ousted Ukraine's pro-Russian president. 8 years later, the people here don't want to see more conflict.
Let's bring in our correspondent Matthias Bulinger now. He joins us from Krematorsk in eastern Ukraine. Matthias, you've been traveling around the front line in eastern Ukraine. Tell us what you've seen.
Shelling has intensified in all these villages around the line, and for many people that was a shock, because the past few years there have been occasional shellings or occasional gunfire, but most of the time people could live their life quietly there, and this has changed during the day and especially during the night. People hear now shelling. It's not very clear where this is targeted. Often it just flies into nowhere, but it also hits the villages and the towns along the border. So the tensions are high and the people are afraid of being hit by something.
Matthias, how is Ukraine responding to the shelling in that part of the country?
That's a good question. The Ukrainian army maintains that they are restrained, that they refrain from firing back, that they will only fire back if their own security, the security of the soldiers, is under threat by these shellings, and that they will refrain. Of course, the other side says something different. It's very hard to verify at this point. The OSCE mission has fixated shellings on both sides.
There's a chance of talks between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin later this week, as I'm sure you know. Do you get the impression that Ukrainians believe a diplomatic solution is still possible?
I think many people here hope for some kind of a peaceful solution. However, of course, the biggest problem is that any solution that might satisfy Putin would be one that gives him leverage over Ukraine, and that is something most Ukrainians are not ready to accept. Any signature by a Ukrainian official, by a Ukrainian president, under a document that says that Ukraine refuses to join the NATO or that Ukraine will agree on the reintegration of these territories on Moscow's terms that would give them a say in the national politics would be hugely unpopular and would have to fear to be ousted by the people. So the bottom line here for most Ukrainians is very clear, that the sovereignty and the future trajectory path of Ukraine are not up for negotiations, and that makes it extremely difficult, because everything that we have seen that has also been proposed maybe by negotiators from the West as a possible compromise would exactly touch on these issues, and that makes it very, very difficult to find a way out here.
Matthias, thank you very much. That was our reporter Matthias Bulinger there in Kramatorsk, eastern Ukraine.
And for more, let's cross over now to Andrei Kortunov. He's Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, and he joins us from Moscow. Good to have you with us. Please tell us, Putin continues military drills while also stressing openness for more diplomatic talks. What does he want to achieve, sending mixed signals like these?
Well, I think the belief in the Kremlin is that you need to keep pressure on the West in order to get the Western attention. Apparently, the Russian leadership is ready for some kind of negotiations with the West and specifically with the United States. But I think they're concerned that if they ease the pressure, the United States might lose interest. I personally do not believe that a direct intervention is something that they can contemplate right now. I think a more probable scenario is diplomatic recognition of the breakaway republics of Donbass, and that would also be a very negative signal to the West and to those who are looking how to implement the Minsk agreements in full.
Well, do we know how Vladimir Putin's stance on Ukraine and on security issues, how that's viewed in Moscow, within the inner circles there?
Well, it's hard to tell, because the decision-making process here is very centralized. So there is only a very narrow group of people who have access to the president and who can advise him or who can have some impact on the decisions that are going to be made. But President Putin was very explicit about what he wants, and I think this is something which is shared by his inner circle. He doesn't want Ukraine to be a part of NATO. He doesn't want the NATO infrastructure to move closer to Russia's borders. He would like to have new channels of communication with the West and hopefully some arms control agreements with the West as well.
Right. I mean, there's a whole list of demands there. And, of course, on the other side, there has been talk of diplomacy, but also the threat of economic sanctions. That threat has so far not had any real effect on Putin's actions. Can he afford to risk business and trade links with Europe and the United States?
Of course, sanctions bite, especially if we are talking about sectoral sanctions, sanctions that might seriously affect the Russian energy sector or the Russian financial system. However, I think it would be probably wrong to imagine that these sanctions will make the Kremlin change its positions on important issues. Security is clearly more important than prosperity. Survival is more important than development, and this is the system of Putin's priorities, which is not likely to change anytime soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Andrei Kortunov, Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, joining us from Moscow. Thank you.